Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. I wanted to personally invite you to an in-person event that we're having. It's a summer solstice fundraiser for Let's Share the Sun on Thursday, June 5th from 6 to 10 p.m. in Jersey City, New Jersey. We'll have a link to this on the notes of the podcast. I hope you could make it, and let's get into it.
She turned to me and says, "Honey, we don't like deregulation down here." I said, "Then why do you have all that solar?" And she looked me in the eye and said, "The good Lord gave us this earth, and we need to take care of it for him." Now, that's a different view of solar, but it's the same endpoint.
Hello and welcome to the Solar Maverick Podcast, where solar meets entrepreneurship and experience. I'm your host, Benoy Thanjan, so let's get into it. Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. I'm really excited in this episode of the podcast to have JD Dillon. He's the Chief Marketing and Customer Experience Officer at Tigo Energy. JD, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here in sunny San Diego.
Yes, definitely. We're here at Intersolar in San Diego. It's the end of February. It's amazing how time flies by. It's February 26th. It's actually unseasonably warm in San Diego. A lot of people who come here for the conference. So definitely, JD, it's great having you on the podcast. If our listeners aren't familiar, can you tell us about Tigo and what your company does?
You bet. So 2007 is when Tigo came into being. And then we sort of gone through three phases of development. 07 to 2013, we were a startup. At that point, we were focusing on module level power electronics. Basically, the founders had an idea to optimize. How do you deal with shade? The simple problem to solve that the company was based on. And in 13, our current CEO came in as an investor, member of the board, and then as CEO. Zvi Alon. And he took us through growth from 13 to 21. 21, we came out with, in addition to MLPE, we came out with battery and inverter, a complete solution for home energy management. And in 2023, we went public, and that takes us to now. So we have three lines of businesses: software, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Module level power electronics was still the basis for which we were founded upon and still drive the lion's share of our revenue. And then we have the battery and inverter for residential.
Yeah, that's a great description and a high-level summary of Tigo. And it was interesting in the pre-interview talking about your background before and how you got into solar. It would be great if you could talk about your journey and how you got into the solar industry and where you are at now at Tigo as the Chief Marketing Customer Experience Officer.
You bet. You bet. So I began at West Point. I was an Army officer. I loved my time in the Army. Still a strong veteran, although I haven't been in many, many years and many pounds ago.
Thank you for your service.
You bet. You bet. Thank you. And I still have a couple of side ventures. One is a movie production company called Military Movies, where we make authentic military films. And then Authentically American is a veteran-owned apparel company. I still dabble in some veteran-oriented projects as well. But after I left the Army, I went into semiconductors, a company called Cypress Semiconductor, which, if you follow, SunPower came out of Cypress Semiconductor, which is a whole podcast in and of itself.
Oh, that is really interesting.
How that happened. Cypress was semiconductors, and I learned problem solving and quality there. Yes, I was in marketing, but everybody was a double E, all engineers. Heck, even when I left, the head of HR had an electrical engineering degree. So, I mean, engineering, it was an engineering-based company, which is a lot of problem solving, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then I came in on July 18th of 2017 to Enphase. The ex-CEO of Cypress invested in Enphase Energy, and the company was going under at that point. And I actually joined not because it was semiconductors, or excuse me, because it was solar, but because of a turnaround situation. And I was brought on to help with a whole swath of people from Cypress to turn the company around. Somehow along the way, I learned to love solar. And specifically, I credit Bernadette at CALSA. Bernadette is now leaving CALSA as the head of CALSA, but she got me very interested in solar as a business and as a lifestyle. And I came to Tigo in 2020. We went public. Enphase turned around. It was the highest performing stock of the Trump presidency. Interesting sidebar there.
Yes.
which is very interesting if you consider the highest performing stock of the Trump presidency. Trump won was a solar company. That says something. And since Tigo, we went public in May of 2023, and we are trying to get back to the growth phase that the industry needs.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I mean, there's so many follow-up questions. I actually didn't realize that Enphase was the top, performing solar company during the Trump administration. So
The
that's
day I
great.
started, the stock was at 72 cents.
hmm
When I left, it was 220.
Oh my
Eventually
gosh.
went up to 340.
Yes, definitely. So that's good to know, especially obviously a lot of people within the industry have hesitations with the new administration. But obviously the long-term dynamics for solar is strong and pro-business as well as this current administration.
Absolutely. And so, unfortunately, I need to take a little sidebar there. I have a couple of quotes that I've done and a piece that I'm going to release soon. Solar isn't red or blue. It's important to remember that.
That's a great point.
A great example, when Gavin Newsom passed the NEM 3.0, and then it went into effect in April of last year, when he passed it the same week, Ron DeSantis vetoed an almost identical bill in Florida. So it is not Democrat or Republican. It's not conservative or liberal, progressive or any of that. It is very much a good industry from multiple angles. And just like Michael Jordan once said, Democrats buy sneakers too. Republicans like small business too. And that's what solar is all about. So I strongly believe we're going in the right direction, and maybe we'll ebb and flow a little bit. We'll slow, we'll speed up, but we're going solar as a country.
Yeah, I think that's great to talk about, especially obviously the new administration, a lot of hesitancy within the industry. But you're right, it's not a political issue. Everyone wants to support solar. It's pro-business and there's a lot of opportunity, creates a lot of jobs, especially with now the domestic manufacturing that's happening in the US. And obviously, like people think of California as a very solar-friendly state, but it hasn't been so friendly. As you mentioned, NEM 2.0 to 3.0, a lot of people know about, or they don't know about, is like there was a proposed 7 gigawatt community solar program that everyone thought that was going to get passed. It was turned down by the California PUC in May of last year, which is extremely disappointing because it's all private investment and it allows people to have solar that don't have and creates a lot of jobs and opportunities. But unfortunately, the utilities in California have a lot of power and, they donate a lot to Governor Newsom's campaign. So
absolutely,
we've experienced this in California, and it's funny when you explain it to people in other states. It's surprising to me that Texas is actually last year the biggest state for solar.
I can't believe it. You stole the words out of my mouth. My next sentence was going to be Texas had the most growth last year, and that is huge.
Yeah, definitely. That is huge, and that shows you very pro-business, obviously easier interconnection and permitting versus other states and a pro-business environment.
I've got a funny Texas solar story. I was on a site, Church's Chicken. The guy who ran it, his name's Bamberger, I believe, off the top of my head. He's got a ranch for disadvantaged youth outside of Austin. And I went to visit the ranch when they were opening up solar. And I was sitting on literally a hayride. It was in a hayride with this well-dressed woman that was probably in her late 60s next to me. And I said, yeah, we're from California, and there's a lot of regulation that leads to solar. And she turned to me and she goes, and I said to her, that's wonderful that you in Texas have a lot of solar. She turned to me and says, honey, we don't like the regulation down here. I said, then why do you have all that solar? And she looked me in the eye and said, the good Lord gave us this earth and we need to take care of it for him. Now, that's a different view of solar, but it's the same endpoint. She wanted solar as much as somebody in Berkeley, California does.
Yes.
Totally different approach, both to end up in solar.
Oh, definitely. That's a great example.
There's multiple reasons to go solar.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting you mentioned, Bernadette. She's done a great job with Calcia. And when you meet her, she has so much energy. I've met her, I think it's been 12 or 13 years was the first time. And just the energy and passion that she has for the solar industry and renewable energy industry is amazing. So I could see how she could help, obviously.
Oh, yes. But the whole team is strong. There's a number of strong people over at CalSA. They do a great job. So we will miss Bernadette, but I think CalSA will do great too.
Yeah, definitely. That's great to know. And it's interesting I feel like we could keep going on tangents. But you know what? I thought it was interesting. I read like the article on PV Magazine that you had, which we'll have on the notes of the podcast. How does like software and service define like the next era of solar, and how is Tigo involved in that?
I think software and service are the next era of solar. So to start with, I believe batteries will become what modules are.
Hmm.
They will be a relatively high priced, but lower than they are now, more, and I hate the term commoditized,
Sure.
but they will ebb and flow with supply and demand, just like modules do. And it'll be the smarts around them that define it. So what is the smarts that's around the module and the battery? Software.
Sure.
And the service side, I come from semiconductors. Semiconductors, you measure quality in parts per billion or parts per million. And we talk about percent failure rate.
Hmm.
Just to do some quick math, that's pph, parts per 100. Not 1,000, not million, not billion. So I believe that service will be the future of the industry. When I got to the industry, 25-year warranty, are you kidding me?
Hmm.
Who keeps anything for 25 years?
Yeah.
That's nuts.
That is nuts.
I mean, just think about the last time you saw a 25-year-old car.
Yeah.
No. And technology moves fast enough that you have repowering, which we'll talk about in a second. You have midlife kickers to a solar system. How do you get more out of it as time goes on? That's all service. That's all M. I personally believe it's a monster future on the service side and software. How many assumptions go into where you come from a large C&I background, right?
Yes.
Utility. How many assumptions go into what the return's going to be?
I mean, there's so many. If you think about it, there's hundreds of assumptions.
And they're all wrong.
Yeah.
So what happens when you find out 3 or 5 or 8 years in that you were off by a little bit? You'll lose money.
Oh, for sure.
So adjusting it as we go, and that's all service.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm sure you know most solar projects actually underperform what is the expected or forecasted.
Of course.
Yeah.
When I try to lose weight, I underperform. I mean, everybody underperforms in reality.
Oh, for sure.
In life.
In life, yes. That is pretty funny, and that's true. And it's interesting. You actually mentioned the topic that I've been talking a lot with on the podcast, repowering of assets. We're seeing a lot of assets at a certain lifetime that they're getting repowered. How is, like, obviously software is an important part in the service part of it. Can you talk about like how maybe Tigo is involved with the repowering of assets? And
sure. So there's 2 angles on that question. I'll start with a less obvious one. As the 2014 and then again in 2017, where when NEC made rapid shutdown mandatory on roofs.
yes.
So depending on if you're adjusting a large project, you may or may not have to put optimizers or at a minimum rapid shutdown devices on a roof. Or if you do an add-on, and it depends on different locations, obviously,
Sure.
different levels of rules. But we're seeing a fair amount of people putting optimizers on after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And the optimizers will get you, our stats say, an average of 5.5% improved production because of solar degradation, shading, and soiling, and various other reasons. So optimizers are a good solid way to get a little bit of oomph in the middle if you are underperforming. So that's point 1.
Interesting.
Point 2 was the press release we did for this trade show.
Oh, yes, for Intersolar, yes.
So a company called Energy is rapidly become our number 1 customer, and their entire business model is repowering. They go to systems that were installed a decade ago, and they go to the homeowner and say, your inverter's a little long in the tooth. Why don't you swap it out with a new one? Now, if it's under warranty, they get a new one usually from that company.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times the installers left. They're what we call in the industry orphans. So the homeowner doesn't even know who to talk to.
For sure.
So these guys come in and they switch out the inverter.
Mm.
Since ours is an open ecosystem and works with lots of other different pieces of equipment, and it's a hybrid inverter, so you can put storage on in the future, they very much like this solution. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing, I believe, of our top 10 customers in the United States, installers in the United States, I believe 5 or 6 of them are repowered.
Oh, interesting. That's a large quantity. I didn't think it would be that.
It was surprisingly large. And to be honest, much as I like to say I'm a marketing guy and I saw the future, no, we're just reinforcing success.
Sure.
I mean, we got some success.
Yeah.
Turns out the installer liked our solution. And so we're doubling down and trying to work with them on that. I think it's a pretty strong future. It's like a used car.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Conceptually similar.
Yeah, it's definitely similar, and it's a big opportunity that I think a lot of the solar industry sees that there's an opportunity for these types of assets. And the key thing is the technology and the price, right? And then, as you mentioned, like software optimizers, ways of, increasing production.
And the business processes. So Energy Aid has it down. I'm speaking on behalf of them. I find them great. Faster the turnaround, they make money or don't. So in a given day, I don't know the exact numbers, so I won't guess, but if a crew does X, whatever the number is, 2, 3, 4, whatever the number is, if the crew does X number of installs in a day and switches them out, then it's break even.
Yeah.
X plus 1, they start making money.
Oh, interesting.
So the faster they can do the turnarounds with high quality installs, you gotta have high quality, but the faster they do the turnaround, and then they have an asset in place, they go back to the customer later.
Yeah.
For upgrades and different services or maybe a battery down the road. But on site, their job is to quick, Jiffy Lube.
Jiffy Lube, for sure. And it's become like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, we're at Intersolar. One of the big events is the solar games.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting to see how quickly they're able to put, solar onto these. Basically, it's like fake roofs, and then it's a competition all over the country for the fastest.
And we have our optimizers up being installed.
That's huge. And Tigo has their optimizers as well.
Matter of fact, one of the crews came by after the fact when I left the booth here about an hour ago. A crew was telling us all of the things we can do to improve.
Oh, that's great.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah, getting that direct feedback.
Continuous improvement. Somebody who had never installed us before. So he ran into all of the issues and said, if you do A, B, and C. As I walked away, I heard him say, so we'd love to use you guys if you just do this.
Yes. And that's the best, like continuous improvement, getting it direct from the customer. And is that what do you think has been part of your success in life, in the sense of, obviously like taking feedback, both positive and negative, incorporating it and adapting? It's interesting to hear like why you joined Enphase, because you wanted that turnaround situation. And, you had obviously colleagues from your previous company. It sounds like you saw an opportunity, that it was a great product. It just wasn't managed correctly, right?
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you're kind of doing something similar with Tigo, but it's an early stage company and you're basically taking it to another level. Can you talk about like what you've learned in your, I guess it's now over 20 something years
oh my God,
of work experience? And
dude, you're killing me. Something years.
Sorry, I subtracted wrong. It's actually only 10 years.
It's quite all right. This was visual. You'd see my gray beard. That's all right.
He's actually 120 pounds. So when he jokes about weight, I don't know what.
So I love continuous improvement. And this came from being in semiconductors. Semiconductors, the industry is such that you have to claw and work your way and grind to get in from 99.7 to 99.85% yield. And everything is a grind and there's rolling up your sleeves. And I believe our industry needs a lot more of that. And I can't fix the industry, but I can fix the company I'm at. Fix is a strong word. I can continue to improve the company.
Sure.
So a great example about that, in last summer, we started to see a little bit of churn. Customers were coming in, they do a couple of installs, and then we saw in our numbers, because we can see when they install in our software system, we had a little bit of turnover. And so we questioned, why is that? And I heard it great from a company in Germany. I met with a customer in Germany. He came in and he had a big beard and he had shorts with overalls. It was a very German looking guy. And he actually said, after a few installs, we got the hang of it and your product was great. So my natural thought process goes to, who doesn't make it to a few, whatever a few is?
Yes.
Who does two and says, this isn't as intuitive as I thought?
Yeah.
Because everybody is different. I don't think we're that much better or worse than Solar Edge. Enphase is a little different because of micros, but I don't think we're that much better or worse than any of those.
Yeah.
We're just different. So when you try something new, there's little quirks, little things. Well, since last July, when we determined that, we've made 35 software adjustments.
Sure.
All little things, small things to make it easier. We've done unboxing videos. We've done
Interesting.
lots more small little videos designed that are 3 minutes that a guy by the name of Greg Smith, who's pretty well known in the industry, he calls himself the snarky solar guy. He's got a hat that says RTFM.
Yeah.
He says it stands for Read the Fun Manual.
Oh, that's funny.
I told me to drop F-bombs anymore. But he does these little videos, 3-minute snippets that if you're on the roof, you can call it up and go, okay, that's where I plug that in.
Yeah.
And so it's continuous improvement. And it's mostly software.
Sure.
Go back to software. Installation guides. We have a checklist now that we're going to build into the software. Just like if you get a mortgage, it goes step by step.
Yeah, definitely.
All to make the user experience better.
That's key, right? As you mentioned, like if it's too complicated for the customer initially, especially new customers, right? They're just going to be like, forget it. I'm just going to stay with what I'm comfortable with. So that's interesting.
I just got a funny analogy. My last job in the Army, I worked on the Patriot missile system. And I worked as a liaison between the contractors at Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and the soldiers. And here's was the joke that we had, something designed by PhD that's got to be able to use by someone with a GED.
Oh, yes. That's a great analogy.
And it's true.
Yeah.
The PhD is not going to be out there firing the missile.
Yeah.
It's going to be some dude who signed up to serve his country who's 19.
Yeah.
Same guy is now a solar installer. And he wants to do his job, do it well, and move on to the next one.
That's a great analogy. And actually, too, like, another great thing is how many people with the military background are in the solar industry. And a lot of people have transitioned, right, to opportunities. And then, obviously, installers, an easier transition to do that. So that's interesting, too, to talk about that analogy. But I think SIA is actually having a veteran job conference coming in the next month or two, which I thought was great that they're doing that.
And Greg Smith, who was at our company, was a Navy nuke, and myself, although he runs it, at NABCEP, we have a veterans breakfast every year.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's great to see, obviously, that we're helping our veterans, when they come from, whatever their roles and responsibilities into the solar industry, which is growing exponentially and will continue to grow exponentially. It's still early in this whole process of the growth of the industry. I think right now, solar only makes 5 to 6% of the electricity generation in the United States, which is really exciting. Also, it would be great to get your perspective, like from where you sit, like what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the solar industry? Obviously, you talked about some of them. I don't know, too, like everyone's obviously talking about AI. I don't know if you want to comment on that or...
What would be a podcast without discussing AI? I'm going to blow everybody away that there's more batteries.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take of the take of the podcast. No, as far as trends, obviously there's more batteries. I think the trend is, how does solar become HVAC?
Yes.
How does it become less scary? My mother gets very nervous whenever I talk to her about solar. I'm not very technical. That's her first thing. Yet, she's conversant about her heating and air conditioning.
Yeah.
She knows how the stove works. She actually knows rudimentary how a fridge works. But I mentioned solar and she said, I'm not very technical.
Yeah.
How do we change that? And I think that's a lot of work of the industry. It's got to become easier.
Mm-hmm.
Products need to be able to interface to each other. We need to have a common plug and play nature of all the different products. We can't have closed ecosystems.
Sure.
Tigo believes in an open ecosystem.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
All of these things are important to the industry. While, of course, we could talk the IRA, we can talk about regulatory. Those are all trends that people talk to death, but I think it's making it more ubiquitous for the common user. In the United States, 3.4% of the homes in the U.S., single-family homes, have solar. Now, that stat in 32% in Australia.
Uh-huh.
It's an order of magnitude.
Oh, definitely.
Just think about adding a zero to the percentage of homes in the United States. You mentioned it. How many more people do we have to train? 10x?
10x, yeah, for sure.
That's a lot of people coming in the industry. That's a lot more for training. That's making it the homeowner. It's not scary. They're not nervous about it. It becomes just like, oh, I got to buy. I think that's a huge trend.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the potential of solar is all the rooftops. So you could easily see when you're flying, like it's still a pretty low percentage of actual penetration. And that's interesting. I didn't know about that. It was only 3.4. Then we actually had an Australian solar installer come on the podcast, and he told me about this 30% number. And I was shocked because there's such a, as you mentioned, 10x, an order of magnitude.
Well, roughly the top, I don't know China, but China's such an oddity anyway. The highest is Australia of about 30. Netherlands is about 24. Japan's like 22. And then we're all the way down at 3.4. South Africa is ahead of us. I mean, we're pretty small. Now, inside the U.S., well, here's a question for you. Now I'm going to ask you a question.
For sure.
I'll quiz you. What states are the highest?
For residential solar?
Yeah.
Oh, I would think California.
It's number 2.
Number 2. Interesting. Hawaii?
Number 1. Hawaii's at about just under 25%.
Yeah.
And California is just over 15%.
Oh, that is really interesting. I don't think a lot of people would have known.
Yeah.
Residential solar.
Texas?
Oh, Texas.
So Texas has they're growing the fastest. Yeah. Good, of course, they have a large denominator.
Yeah, definitely.
The percentage of homes, the number of homes.
The number of homes.
And so the percentage is low, but it's growing fast.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know the percent growth there, but like you, I saw that they are the largest growth.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that obviously was utility scale in Texas. Obviously, land is cheap there, and it's a lot easier to go through the permitting interconnection process compared to other states. I think that, so it's interesting. I interviewed this Australian EPC, and it was like a 1-page document to get approved by the utilities.
Yes.
And you don't have to have like someone come out to the system like from the utility, which could take, in certain cases for large projects, like 3, 6 to 9 months.
And think about O&M.
Oh, O&M.
It's a huge, broad country.
Yeah.
So I've talked to an installer that one of the reasons that we sell quite a bit is our module level monitoring.
Yes.
The guy actually says, I don't have to do an 8-hour each way truck roll to go to a house.
Yes.
I mean, 16-hour round trip to do a truck roll. I mean, anybody in the U.S. who complains about truck rolls, try doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
And so Australia, and another interesting thing about Australia, so there's fundamentally 4 reasons homeowners go solar: save money, save the planet, energy independence, and they're gadget people.
Mm-hmm.
Energy independence. Australians are pretty independent people.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Energy independence is huge. And we're seeing now actually a lot more Americans being concerned about energy independence.
Oh, sure.
And then with storage getting cheaper and cheaper, a lot of people want to be like independent of the grid. So that's interesting, because people are worried about obviously the transmission distribution network going out or obviously there's been a lot of storms and, wanting to maintain.
I lost power a month and a half ago for no reason.
Yeah.
Wasn't like there was a big snowstorm.
Yeah.
We're in California, for goodness sakes. Bay Area, California. There wasn't even rain.
Yeah.
It just figured out why.
Yeah.
It was out in the morning. So my kids were getting ready to go to school and no power. But I have a battery. And so we were able to take care of them getting off to school.
That's pretty interesting that, you would think there wouldn't be an issue with electricity in there. Actually, in San Diego, downtown San Diego, we lose power periodically for a few hours.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how is this happening? I don't have battery, storage, but it's just weird to me.
Now, we were talking about India earlier. It's a whole different ball of wax. India, your power is like 3 times a day.
Oh, yeah.
That's like a daily occurrence.
It's a daily occurrence. That's true. So, like, even if you think about, like, how many, even though our transmission distribution network's pretty advanced, it's still very old. But if you go to other parts of the world, they don't have the infrastructure. And so it's almost like landlines to cell phones, right? Like you basically have localized, you have your generation, then it's transmitted, distributed to the house, and now it's decentralized, right? So it creates, you don't have to build the infrastructure technically if you're localizing the energy, which is huge, and that creates energy, obviously independence. That also makes us less dependent on foreign countries, especially as we transition more to electric vehicles. that you won't be dependent as much on oil and gas, even though now the US has a plentiful natural gas supply.
And Germany, since I was quoting stats earlier, has got 12.5% of their homes are solar.
Are solar. Interesting. And they've said, actually, I don't know if you've seen this in Germany, because I spent a lot of time in Germany. At certain times, over 50% of the energy is coming from solar and wind, which is like obviously the largest I've heard of one country. Obviously, they're a lot smaller than the US, but still, that's pretty interesting. Like we're seeing basically other countries kind of ahead of us in certain aspects of renewable energy, where a lot of the technology and innovation is actually coming from here.
Germany's got some good
They do
too. SMA is a strong company.
Oh, for sure. And obviously the Chinese are coming up too. With the Chinese companies are coming.
I've heard that.
A lot of innovation.
I read that somewhere.
Yes. And their government's investing a lot because they believe that solar storage batteries are going to be the future.
Half the companies over in that billion are Chinese.
That's a great point. In Intersolar, half the companies are Chinese companies that are there. So yeah, it's just interesting to see how everything's changing so quickly. I don't know if you saw, SIA came out 2 weeks ago, that now we're able to domestically produce as many panels as we imported last year, which I was shocked to actually read that.
I did not, and I'm going to have to, because that is interesting.
I didn't think it was going to happen that quickly. I thought it was going to be another 2 years or 3 years. I could send you, JD, the press release they came out with a week ago, and I'll actually have that on the notes of the podcast as well. But I was shocked to hear that, because I think that changes. During COVID, there were such supply chain issues where you couldn't get, equipment, panels.
I remember a couple years ago having in Anaheim, no, it was here. A couple years ago having Intersolar, and all of the solar equipment was out on boats out in the, it was actually in LA.
Oh, it was.
So people were like, why can't you ship? Well, look out there on the water.
Yes.
So yes, I remember the supply chain, the good old days.
The good old days. It's crazy if you think like COVID's now been like 5 years. We're almost 5 years removed, but it doesn't seem that long ago, and it seems long ago. And obviously, as an industry, we continue adapting and adjusting, and it's still early stages of an industry that's going to continue to grow exponentially faster than before. Actually, I have like another question. The Solar Maverick podcast is about solar and entrepreneurship. It's interesting to me to hear about like the other ventures that you're doing, which is totally unrelated to, renewable energy. Like I find it really interesting about the military movies that you talked about that you're like investing in. And then I think there was another sort of military.
Authentically American.
Yeah, Authentically American. Can you talk about like what that is and how you got involved or what got you interested?
Sure. Both were West Point grads. I'm 1993. See, now I just said I just dated myself from the beginning. We've come full circle. So I was West Point grad in 93. And
you were an electrical engineer.
I was an electrical engineer,
yes.
But my classmates, I had two classmates. One runs Authentically American, which is American-made apparel. So when I graduated in 1993, 50% of the apparel consumed in the United States was made here.
Oh, interesting.
Now it's 3.
Wow.
If you're patriotic, or if like Tunnels to Towers or Gary Sinise, any of these organizations, having your apparel made in China, pretty bad.
Yeah.
You should kind of support here. So we're a veteran-owned business and it's supported here. And then military movies, we released a movie called Lonesome Soldier, which was in theaters. Right now it's on Amazon. And it's an authentic, real-world story. And we've got a slate of about 7 more. That all we need is funding. If anybody wants to invest, give me a call. But for authentic military movies about the military that tells the truth. It's not too glitzy, not too glamoury. Our movie Lonesome Soldier is about a young man who has a drug overdose and tries to take his life. I mean, it's very tragic about PTSD, but it is told very authentic to the point that it's kind of uncomfortable. But we need that uncomfortable.
Oh, for sure.
Those are both side ventures. I'm on the board of both those companies and an investor in both too.
That's amazing to hear. And that's great that you're using, obviously, what you've learned over these brief few years of your career.
And the money I've made in solar.
That's true. So it's interesting because I could relate to that because I actually have a lot of ventures outside of solar. I own like restaurants and bars in New York and New Jersey and an early stage investors on some AI companies and Bitcoin mining company that using renewable energy. So I thought that was really interesting because I've taken my solar money and invested it in other things. And I'm on boards of several companies, and I thought that was really interesting. And also, too, your military perspective, military related adventures, and then not adventures, but I guess it's an adventure.
Not just a job,
Adventure.
to use that great tagline from the 90s.
The 90s, and then obviously being a West Point grad, and obviously I'm sure the network within West Point, and you
Very
mentioned
strong.
it's very strong from my friends who have gone to West Point. So this has been an amazing interview, JD. Is there anything else that you would like to speak about what you're seeing in the industry or about Tigo that we haven't spoken about?
The only big thing I would close with is, as an industry wide, we're not perfect. Nobody is. We being Tigo. Quality is everything. It's so important. And quality is not sexy. It's not fun. It takes work. It's methodically analyzing defects. It's going through and looking at every single service ticket and say, where are the trends? Where can we make our product easier to install? And this applies to everybody. I believe our whole industry needs to focus on quality. And again, somebody out there is going to hear that and say, Tigo. Well, sure, everybody has their challenges, but we need to work through them together as a team. Because if there's ever a fire out on a solar installation, on the news, they don't say it's Tigo. They don't say it's company X. They don't say it's company Y. The whole industry suffers. Every one of us suffer if one of us makes a mistake, because solar gets impugned, and that's bad. So
That's a great point. That's a great way to end the podcast.
Yeah.
It's crazy when there's a fire in solar, it seems to be publicized by the media, and then I immediately get calls from people like,
yes,
look at this fire, like solar is not a good thing to do. And I'm like, it's actually like very low percentage that a solar project goes on fire. And even when I talk to customers, we do like CNI and then like utility scale. That's like almost every conversation they'll ask about fires, you know?
but when a door or a latch comes off of a plane, they go down to the point, they tell you it's United. They tell you it's the Max, whatever it was. They tell you exactly what goes on, and they don't impugn the entire airline industry.
Industry.
Solar gets impugned as one mistake.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to end the
Very good
podcast.
end, yeah.
If our audience wants to learn more about Tiger or you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So TigoEnergy.com. But we're extremely active on LinkedIn because we're B2B more than B2C. We're not that much on Instagram or any of the other social, but LinkedIn, number one, I'm very active there. Number two, we're very active there. We do an average of one press release every other week.
Oh, that's a lot.
So we do a lot of them, and they're always out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's our strongest channel.
That's great to know, and we'll have that as well on the notes of the podcast. I really appreciate, JD, you making the time during Intersolar, which is a very busy time for all of us. And I know, Tigo's exhibiting as well. Thank you again for making your time. Keep up the great work, and I enjoyed our conversation.
My pleasure. It was a blast.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Solar Maverick Podcast. The Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Renew Energy. We're a solar development and consulting firm. If you believe that this podcast is adding value to you, please give us a 5-star review and share with those that you think could benefit from this information. Please email all questions, suggestions, and feedback to info@renewenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. The Solar Maverick Podcast is produced by Podcast Laundry and executive produced by Benoy Thanjan and Kevin Y. Brown.